Let's now talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's look at their offseason additions and departures from last year. They brought in Orlando Brown Jr., so that's going to be, interesting. Obviously, a good tackle in the NFL and definitely helps out their offensive line. Bringing Irv Smith Jr. to replace Hayden Hurst. Cody Ford and Sidney Jones are both pretty good backups, in my opinion. Now you look at the draft, you look at some of the rookies they brought in. Myles Murphy, who should have a good impact, should definitely see the field a lot early for the Cincinnati Bengals. DJ Turner as a cornerback, Jordan Battle as a safety, Charlie Jones, Chase Brown as a wide receiver and running back. So I like their draft. I think it was pretty solid. They really went for what kind of defense they want to go for. And now you look at some of the departures. You lose your top safeties in Jesse Bates and Von Bell. We'll see how they adjust when it comes to that. They have Hayden Hurst, Eli Apple, Samaje Perine, who also are all leaving. So those guys, they're definitely replaceable. I don't think they're as big as the Jesse Bates and Von Bell moves, and that they let go of. So we'll see what happens and what effects that could have to the defense and offense. So let's go ahead and now talk about last year for the Cincinnati Bengals in their offense. So they were 8th in total yards per game, 5th in total passing yards per game, 29th in total rushing yards per game, and they were 7th in total points per game. Obviously, we know they have one of the best offensives in the league. When obviously it comes to the passing game, they have one of the, if not the best receiving core in the NFL. Also, they got one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So, we'll see what happens there. So let's talk about their offense. Obviously, you got the man, Joe Burrow, Joe Cool, Joe Burr. A top 3 quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. Last year, he had 1,400 yards. He had 35 touchdowns, and he had 12 interceptions. So, Joe Burrow obviously had a great season last year. Looking to succeed and keep going from that, I think he has a decent chance to win MVP next year. So, we'll see with that. Obviously, now you have Joe Mixon, who is very inconsistent, but he is a dynamic football player. We know how good he can be in the passing game, the run game. He can do a lot of things, but how consistent will he be? Because we know he can go off for 5 touchdowns. He did last year versus the Panthers. And now, now you talk about this offensive line. We'll get to receiving core last, but bringing in Orlando Brown Jr., obviously a great move for that left tackle spot. Cordell Volson, Ted Karras, Alex Kappa are pretty solid interior offensive lines. And then you look at the right tackle spot of Joni Williams, who may have possibly been traded or released because he didn't want to play right tackle. But I think at this point in the offseason, we're just going to assume he's fine with playing right tackle because this is his projected offense from our lads. And then obviously you talk about this receiving core. You talk about Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Irv Smith Jr. This is a good receiving core. This is good weapons for the Cincinnati Bengals. Jamar Chase had 1,000 yards last year, and I think he missed a few games last year. 9 touchdowns. T. Higgins, 1,029 yards, 7 touchdowns. Tyler Boyd had a great season. So you can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong with this offense, who should still put up great numbers, still should be the biggest reason why they make the playoffs and, spoiler alert, in my opinion, win the division. And they're doing everything greatly. They're doing everything greatly. And I think I'll give props to kind of going off of their last offensive line and kind of building that up, because they obviously had a really bad offensive line the year they made the Super Bowl. And then last year, they bring in some guys like Lalo Collins, who had a disappointing season. And they're like, okay, let's get the guys. Let's get Orlando Brown Jr. Let's make sure we are getting good offensive linemen, which I think they did pretty well and should be decent enough to protect Joe Burrow. Nothing crazy, but it's definitely made a big upgrade with Orlando Brown Jr., who obviously won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's going to the dark side for, now with the Bengals. So, again, I'm very excited for this offense. This should be another top 10 offense, even top 5 offense next year. So let's go ahead now and talk about the Cincinnati Bengals defense, which, I think is there's some questions. There's some questions about their defense. You take a look at last year. In allowed total yards, they were 16th. Allowed passing yards, they were 23rd. And allowed rushing yards, they were 7th. And allowed points, they were 6th. So they had a decent defense, when it came to rushing and points, yards per game. So, again, the passing yards, I think, is, obviously a question from last year, but also a question now that I think this defense, in theory, has gotten worse. On paper, has gotten worse. They're not incredibly bad, but not incredibly bad, but not the best. You start with the safeties. I think that's the biggest thing for the Cincinnati Bengals is you lose Von Bell, you lose Jesse Bates. How do you replace him? And you can't just replace him like that in 1 year, especially if you're not making insane free agency moves. You got Dax Hill from 2022 draft, Nick Scott, who's going to projected starter. You have Jordan Battle. So we'll see how those guys kind of rotate between the safeties, but they're obviously not going to replace Jesse Bates and Von Bell right away. But over time, I think they can definitely grow and be a solid safety, I guess, duo, trio. And so we'll see what happens with that. You have Jermaine Pratt at linebacker, Logan Wilson at linebacker. They're a good 1-2 punch at the linebacker position. You look at the defensive line, who I think is probably their strongest asset on the defense, their strongest group. Trey Hendrickson, who had 8 sacks, DJ Rader, BJ Hill, both very good interior defensive linemen and should hopefully help with that run defense that they, poor run defense they did have, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. No, the good run defense. My bad. And then you got Sam Hubbard, who I think is a good defensive lineman. And then you still have Myles Murphy, who could probably find his way as a starter come at the end of the season. And then you look at the cornerbacks. It's not great. I like Mike Hilton. I like Chidobe Awuzie. They're nice. Nothing crazy. We'll see what happens with Cam Taylor-Britt. They brought in DJ Ivey from the draft. So I think that's the biggest question mark is their secondary. How good is that going to look? I know Mike Hilton's going to be good. I know Chidobe Awuzie is going to be good. But what is Cam Taylor-Britt, Nick Scott, Dax Hill, Jordan Battle, DJ Ivey? What do they all look like? And I think that's one of the big things you're betting on when it comes to this defense. But overall, they got a good defense. Obviously, Myles Murphy is a backup. Just of a side, who I think is a nice defensive lineman. Obviously, I know he got a lot of hate at the end of the season last year because he pushed Patrick Mahomes to give the Chiefs a chance to win the game, which they ultimately did. Linebackers, I think there are some decent backup linebackers. DJ Turner also as a cornerback. I don't know if I talked about him. So, this defense is solid. Nothing crazy. Not a top 10 defense. Probably wouldn't say a bottom 10 defense. But I think, if anything, if there's a thing limiting them of going far, it would be the defensive side of the football. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens with the safeties. That's the biggest question when it really comes down to everything. So we'll see. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Comment down below, what did I get right and wrong about this team? And subscribe while you're at it. And hit the notification bell if you're still waiting for your team to get talked about. And if you want to see the full preview of this team's division, go ahead. The video should be on the screen right now. Peace out.